Okay, we are good to go. Greg, would you like to do introductions of our first candidate?
Sure would. Dr. Jeff Graham is our first candidate this evening. And Jeff, we'd like to introduce our panel here. I just want you to know that the ADC and the Board of Education both nominated several people, and about most of them have chosen to join us this evening. We have Becky Smith, who is a retired teacher. We have Tim Jama representing the Lorain Administrative Association. We have David Gomez representing Lorain Education Association. We have Barb Piscopo representing the Historical Society. We have Marcus Madison representing Boys and Girls Club in Lorain. We have Tony Gallo representing the County Chamber. We also have Victor Leandri representing El Centro. Barbie Washington, a parent, and also representing It Takes a Village. We have Ed Oley from the hospital, from Mercy Hospital. Mayor Jack Bradley is with us this evening. We also have Gloria Nolan, resident with us, and also from Tower Education, Jesse Tower. So Franco, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you very much. And so with that, we can get started. First question, Dr. Graham. Tell the group about yourself and why you think you are the type of superintendent the Lorain City Schools District needs right now.
Okay, in terms of a little bit about myself, I started out as a physics teacher in Medina Highland and Wadsworth High School. And for those of you who heard this last time, I apologize, but it says I'm still the same person as I was last time I interviewed. One day I was in the hallway and a assistant principal said to me, Jeff, have you ever thought about doing what I do for a living? And I said, John, I have absolutely no idea what you do for a living. And he said, I have the opportunity to spend more time with the kids who need more time. And I just finished my master's degree in curriculum instruction, but I immediately went back and got my administrative license because that's where my passion was, serving students who need more time. I had the opportunity a year later to become the assistant principal at Medina High School. 2 years later, the principal retired and I was asked to be the principal at Medina High School. And then I wanted to be the superintendent of a small district where I lived and had the opportunity blessed to become the superintendent of Woodridge Local Schools. It's a district of about 2,000 kids in Summit County, serving parts of Akron, parts of Cuyahoga Falls, and several smaller communities, Peninsula, Boston Heights, Boston Township. And I was there for 7 years. My first meeting in actually the county office, I was pulled out by a professor from Cleveland State. And he said, Jeff, and he introduced himself and I said, Jeff, do you know that you have the largest achievement gap in the state? And I knew it was big, but I had no idea to what degree. But again, that was my passion, is to spend more time with the kids who need more time. So we worked pretty hard on that. As a staff, we engaged the community, we engaged our staff. And I think it was my second year there. It was our, my first year there was our 5th year of being in continuous improvement. And based on today's scale, it'd be the C. My second year there, we were excellent. And then the next year, we were excellent with distinction, and we're able to maintain that. Again, just because we had a solid plan and great people working on it. After 7 years, people convinced me that I could do some good in Parma. And Parma at the time had failed 7 straight levies and just it was a mess. Because they were a mess financially, they were a mess in every other category. But good people and solid bones, but literally everything slashed to the bone. We were able to pass the largest levy in the history of the district, but what that allowed for is an opportunity to really build a district from square one, because everything was slashed. But we were able to maintain an excellent rating throughout that, and I was there for 5 years. And people I knew and trusted convinced me that I could do some good in Lorain. Went in Lorain. I was there actually I was hired at the board meeting was at 7 o'clock at night, and that one went on for a while. 9 o'clock the next morning, House Bill 70 was introduced and passed. So we had 6 months to convert our EPS to Cs, or we'd be taken over in terms of the place under our Academic Distress Commission, based on the new law, which would lead to a CEO after a couple of years. And we continued to focus. We knew we couldn't get those EPS to Cs, statistically speaking, but we put a plan in place that was sustainable and it was appropriate and implemented it. And it was a plan that engaged our community and focused on our children. And I think the second part of your question is why am I a candidate? I guess that would be a good fit. I guess I can speak from my perspective. Had a chance to spend some time in Lorain and loved it. And people at the time asked me, and it was the quote I gave all the time is, what do you like so much about Lorain? And I said, it's a community where everybody hugs everybody, and they mean it. And it's so from my perspective, it's a passion. I'm in a great district now, great community now, but there's a calling in many ways to go back to Lorain.
Okay. Those who are on the call, if you have anything related to that question, feel free to join in now. If you're satisfied, we can move on to question 2. Okay. Question 2, Dr. Graham. Lorain's report card shows that there is an achievement gap among our minority students. What is one thing you would do to close that gap?
And engage everyone. And right as I was leaving, we didn't have a time to actually follow through on it. We actually did an equity audit. An equity audit is information that from our district over, I think it was 3 years or 5 years. We will look back because it's all about equity. It's all about equal access to opportunities. And we would look back what we should see, and at the time, and my numbers are close, I think when you look at, I think we were 27% white, I think we were 26% African-American, 40% Hispanic, and 10 or 15% multicultural. But what you should see across everything, whether it's discipline or AP courses or college courses, you should see roughly that same breakdown. And we didn't. And the things that weren't even close. So I think we need to gather data from many, many, many areas, and that's one of them, because that identifies our reality. And I'll give you an example of a district, because I've done this in several districts. In one district, we looked at the data, and we saw that over the course of 5 years, only 3 African-American students, five took the ACT, and none were in AP courses. So we tried to look back to why, and then we engaged staff. We learned from our community. We learned from everybody. We traced it back to 7th grade math. The 7th grade math teacher determined what course that student would take in 8th grade math. So if you qualified for for Algebra 1 or not. And then as you go down to high school, if you were in that Algebra 1 course, of course, you're taking the more advanced math classes, and they would build the schedule around that. So those students only had opportunities to the other AP courses. So it was something that was self-inflicted, something we created, and we had to fix it. So we had to make sure that all of our students had equal access to opportunities. But I also mentioned that we listened. When I was there last time, and what we did in Canton and what I've done other places is you engage the community and you find out what the needs are. And when we did that in Lorain, it came back loud and clear. We need healthcare. We need dental care. We need vision care. And what we did was we reached out to Mercy Hospital and had a conversation with Ed, and it's completely aligned with their mission. And I think from the time that he and I first met, we talked for about an hour. And I remember at the end of the conversation, he said, it's not official yet because I got to get some people on board, but we're in. And 6 months later, we had 3 clinics in our buildings and a plan to grow that. And so I guess the short answer to your question is you engage the right people, which is staff and community. You look at data to find out what our reality is. You put those 2 things together, you identify needs, and you meet needs. I think it's just that simple.
Okay. Any follow-up from the group? Okay. And Dr. Graham, these questions are all summarized from all of the group members here in the questions they've submitted. So these are not mine.
Thank you. That's right.
Frank, this is Victor Leandri. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
And not sure if there's another question that might cover this or not, but you talk about involving the staff and the community, but I didn't hear nothing in regards to parents. And I know you include them when you say include everybody, but how would you go about including parents in this plan?
And again, and I apologize for not being more clear. In my version of community, it's community leaders, it's civic leaders, it's parents, it's everybody. And I think that the way we did it last time was, at least based on the data we collected after, was effective. When I first got there, we engaged in a communications audit. We surveyed and we had surveys, we had focus groups, we looked at all that different data, and we engaged people. We went from having no plan to having a very solid plan, and when we surveyed again to find out if we were responding appropriately to the needs of the community, the consensus was yes. And what the communications audit was based on or built around was, what information do you want and how do you want to receive it? And then once we know how to do that, how do you want to be engaged? So our goal from the very beginning and throughout was to engage our community, parents, everybody. So it's a more comprehensive approach than, and we also engaged by creating a CBS, which is a community business school partnership. And it was something that existed already in Parma when I was there, and we wanted to replicate that. And what we did is we met with, there was 12 or 15 different people that represented different groups in the community. We had parents, we had people who represented civic organizations, we had faith-based leaders, we had people from the Chamber of Commerce, so all the different groups were represented. And then once we established who we wanted to be and how we wanted to serve and how we wanted to partner on all these different issues, again, based on that same data, then everybody went back out to their group and brought back more members. And we went from, I think it was 12 to 15 people. And in my last interview, I said it was 300. Actually, the number is 500. We ended up with 500 active members at the beginning of the next school year. So the goal is, Victor, to engage everyone.
Dr. Graham, this is Ed Oley. Just a quick question. You've been gone now a few years and some different experiences. Is there anything that you've learned that you would change about your approach coming back to Lorain that maybe would work better than where you were headed when you were here?
I guess I don't know the specifics. To answer your last question first, to do things differently than I did the first time. Things have changed, not just in me and my experiences, but things are different in Lorain. So I think as a result, the approach would need to be different because it would need to be personalized to be more timely. That said, in terms of what I've learned, in Cleveland and in Canton, had the opportunity to do a lot of learning from different perspectives. What I mean by that, Cleveland is very, very, very structured. Everything has process and process and process. So I think I've become more, I'm a very process-oriented person to begin with, but to engage people differently through different processes. So they're different strategies. So I've learned that way. But I think that in Canton, a lot of the things that we did in Lorain were reinforced because the needs in Canton were similar to the needs in Lorain. And again, I think when you engage people and respond to what they identify as being their needs, that I think those things kind of run for themselves. But I think a much more structured plan. So I think that I've grown in that area.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to question 3. And Dr. Graham, it says, morale has been an issue in the district. What is the first step you take as CEO of Lorain City Schools to bridge the gap between the teachers and the administration in decisions like policies and curriculum? And if you could be specific, please, they ask.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to what I've done consistently in last few districts is you meet people and you listen to people and you react appropriately. I think you create opportunities for dialogue. We have a district full of experts, administratively speaking, as well as teaching staff and support staff, and they know what our needs are. And I think the goal is to listen a variety of different ways. And I rattled off a bunch of different ways that we've done it in the past. To add just a couple, I talked about surveys, I've talked about focus groups and those types of things. But something else that I've done now for the past probably 10 years or so is have lunch meetings. And I go to a building and it's during their scheduled lunch times, and I just sit and we talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. So it's an opportunity for me to learn in a lot more personalized way and need a lot more detailed information. I also have always had open door sessions where I block off a few hours, and it was every couple of weeks. And it's just whoever comes in, we talk about whatever you want to talk about. But I think listening is a big part of that. But I think where it matters is, what are you doing once you figure some things out? So it's reacting appropriately once we've identified areas which we need to grow. And once we've identified those areas, we get the right people in the room, we come up with a plan, and then we execute that plan. It's creating a plan is part of it, but you have to implement a plan before it actually makes any difference. But it's listening, gathering information, working with people to resolve issues.
Okay. Any follow-up? All right. Let's move on to question 4. Lorain City Schools already have its challenges with low performance staff. Wait a minute, did I just ask that one? I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. Question 4, the Lorain City Schools already has its challenges with low performance staff and student morale. What are the most important elements when implementing a working plan for the district that sets the district on a positive path?
And it comes down to, and again, it comes down to creating a positive culture. What does that culture look like? And again, I believe it's one that's collaborative, it's engaging. And this came from a book, Culture Code, but it's been our focus because what you described is exactly the way Canton was described when I arrived there. And we focused our entire plan, our strategic plan, based on that piece. You need to create a culture where people feel safe, not only physically, but also emotionally and mentally. We need to create a culture where vulnerability is not only accepted, it's expected, and to create a culture where everyone in the district knows their role and how to serve students, how to improve as a school community. So I think it's based on creating that healthy culture, because without it, you can't take steps anywhere else. So you have to make sure people are taken care of.
Okay.
And again, how did we do that? We engaged everybody. We went through a long process. We identified the areas in which people thought, or why people thought the culture was unhealthy. We went through and did a needs assessment. We looked at what the root cause analysis was. And once we had the root cause analysis done, we looked at impact webs to find out which ones had the greatest impact. You can't fix everything, but oftentimes you can find the 1 or 2 things that have an impact on everything else, and those are the areas you focus. Okay. So our staff created the plan.
Any follow-up? Okay. Question 5. Establishing community partnerships has been difficult due to the lack of continuity in the district and building level leadership. What will you do to gain the support and trust necessary to benefit from solid relationships with willing community partners?
And again, I don't know the condition of CBS now as it was when I was there, but it's an opportunity to have the right people in the room. And it wasn't, we weren't done yet. We had a lot of work ahead of us. And because CBS implies a few things. It's community, business, school partnership. So everybody together, not just what can folks do for us, but what can we do for you? And I think those that creates an opportunity to grow those relationships. But the other way is you reach out to people. Again, whether they're district needs or not, it comes down to a lot of different relationships, partnerships, and opportunities for our students. Again, it's an issue of equity, and we need to engage. And again, parents, community leaders, business leaders. So the way you do it is with intention. You create opportunities and you seize opportunities. And if they're not there, you go knock on a door.
Okay. Any follow-up to that?
I have a question, follow-up question.
Okay.
Thank you. With that question, can you elaborate? I would say over your first 90 days, would engaging the public be something that you would have as a focus point for your plan in terms of taking on this role and connecting with community partners and bringing them to the table? And will the CBS be a part of that?
The short answer to that is yes. The longer answer is I would need to learn more about what's going on specifically with the staff and internally. Got to take care of business inside before we can reach outside with any expectation of success. And I'll tell you how we did it in Canton. In Canton, there was part of the culture issue was the staff was under the impression, at least, that it was very top down in the past. And we wanted to create a more collaborative leadership approach. So what I did is I helped create some of the parameters and some of the expectations, but I stepped away. And I was in and out, so I was listening, but they drove it. The staff and our leadership team drove the process hand in hand. And as a result of that, I was able to spend more time in the community with their parents, with the organizations, and kind of bring those things together. So I guess it depends on, you talked about morale being low and some other issues. It would depend on a little, I need more information to have, be able to give you a 90-day plan.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As far as collaboration, when you talk about the staff being included, does that mean they will be included in policy and curriculum and things that go on throughout the district instead of top-down decisions being made and the staff not being included? It always helps to have staff input, and it makes them feel part of that decision process. Will that be happening?
I agree completely. And I think this is year 18 for me as a superintendent. And I think you would talk to anybody that I've worked with over those 18 years, they would describe me as somebody who's collaborative on all issues. It is, I think, something very important to me. And again, if you were to follow the process, and it's actually outlined, I sent Franco a video of what we went through and how we did it, but I can send it to the folks in this group as well. Everything was driven by staff. Again, we created structure and some parameters and some expectations in terms of how things would happen, and we set process, but it was completely staff driven.
Okay.
So I
Well,
agree.
and in the past, with this past leadership, curriculum was purchased, staff never had any input in it. It was shoved down their throats, and I think that is truly an unfair thing to do, not allowing them to have some input. They're the Army, they're the ones that are teaching and need to help decide what's going to make their job easier.
I agree.
So
Building experts. I can't speak to the leadership that was there in the past, but yeah, we have a district full of experts, and we need to engage them.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, especially in things like curriculum. Yes.
Right.
And just to tell you where we are in Canton, our model is that the teachers create it, and then we provide training and coaching. The emphasis is on training and coaching, not consequences. And teachers will be coaching teachers, support staff coaching support staff, and it's a model, again, that they've created, and we stand by completely.
Okay, speaking on that, and I don't know if I'm going off here.
I'm going to say that's good.
With everything going on with COVID, are the teachers going to be part of the process of how it's going to come back into the classroom? Because they are the ones that are going to really be affected by, the classroom situation.
And again, if you talk to our teachers or our teacher leaders, they have a seat at every table. So the short answer is yes.
Okay,
With
perfect.
an emphasis on keeping
wanna hear
people.
Well, that's a great segue to our next question.
Perfect. I'm good.
Yeah, question number 6. Come August, COVID-19 will still be with us. How do you envision the start of the school year? What resources do you believe will need to be in place to have a successful start of the school year?
Actually, we have a school that goes year round, so they start back up again here in a few weeks, and she had this conversation last week. I don't know. And again, we will follow the guidance of the Department of Health, and so whatever those parameters are, but I can tell you 100% of the time we'll err on the side of keeping people safe. I don't know what that looks like. People talk, I've had many teachers ask, I'm high risk, what are you going to do to help me? Whatever it takes to make sure you're safe. So in terms of a specific plan, I don't have one. I can tell you that the values will be based on that. But the argument is, and I see both sides, our children, especially children in Canton, children in Lorain, they need to be in school. We were blessed to be able to provide our students with 3 meals a day, actually on day 1, so they were eating, but there's so many other needs that are met by the school that they don't get when there is no school in session. So our kids need to be in school for a variety of reasons.
Okay. Any follow-up to that?
I have a follow-up question about that,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah, fire away, sir.
All right, thank you. Dr. Graham, today a USA Ipsos poll was released stating that 1 in 5 teachers are unlikely to go back to school if their classrooms reopen in the fall. And in a separate poll, it's of parents who have at least 1 child in grades K-12. 6 in 10 of these parents stated that they are seriously looking into some type of online at-home learning option. Many districts, soon as school was shut down in March, passed out laptops for online learning. In Lorain, we had paper packets. Do you plan on incorporating maybe a one-to-one computer program for the kids in the fall, and how much will technology play into moving forward with COVID-19?
Great question, David. And again, just a couple things in terms of, I don't know enough about where we are one-to-one. As I understand it, it was one-to-one, but there was some difficulty getting equipment back. Let me just tell you what we did in Canton, because it's what I believe to be the right thing. We came out with a choice sports, and we thought it was going to be a short-term layoff. It was 3 weeks off, but one of those weeks for us was spring break. So choice boards were grade level specific independent student work to keep their skills sharp while they were gone. Great. The team did a great job putting it together. Again, we engaged our staff. We had so teachers were at the table, and we created something that we actually were very proud of. During that time, we suspected that things would get a little bit, the break from school would be a little bit longer. So we also, during that 3-week period, began to plan. And what was amazing to me was how many teachers stepped up and said, and not amazing because teachers don't typically, but it's just still amazing to watch. How many teachers stepped up and said, I can help with this. But again, the part that is amazing is how many teachers said, okay, help me. Again, it goes back to that, being a safe place to be vulnerable. So we made sure we opened up hotlines and we did wellness checks. And those 2 ways we gathered information from our students about what their needs were. So I need a device, I need access to the internet, and we provided it. So during that 3-week period, and a little bit after, because we had a lot of students who had needs, because in Canton we're not completely one-to-one, but we got devices out to our students and we got access to our students. So I do think it's critical. So we had something that was independent, but then over the course of the year, we got really good at doing remote learning because we needed to, and because our staff was comfortable being vulnerable and leaning on and learning from each other. So it was a pretty amazing thing to watch. So I would anticipate technology being a big piece. To say that would all be in place by August, I don't know enough about our specifics, but I gotta believe that's doable.
Thank you.
And then, by the way,
have a follow-up as well.
With Canton City specific stats. I'm sorry, Barbie.
Sorry about that. So I also am speaking with a lot of parents, and some are saying that they aren't comfortable at this time sending their kids back to school. We don't know what it will look like by the time August comes. And we would like to know if the district would consider offering maybe extending at-home learning to those parents that feel that they would benefit or their kids would be safer, so we don't lose more children to other online school or charter schools that might offer that as well.
Yeah, I guess.
So your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, thanks. And it's not just, again, kids and their safety, it's parents and grandparents who live with these children who are at risk. So there's a lot of dominoes in a very big picture to consider. But to answer your question, again, I'm optimistic that ODE and the Ohio Department of Health will provide some guidelines for us to follow. That said, with the flexibility that we have, we will err on the side of making sure people are safe. And the goal is not just to retain students for the sake of retaining students. The goal is, as I mentioned earlier, identifying needs and meeting those needs. So this is clearly a need, and we have to figure out a way to meet it.
All right, thank you for those follow-ups.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
This is Jack Bradley.
Jack?
Let's say that the state did not require students or teachers to wear face covering or masks. What would be your position as far as requiring that for students and teachers before they would be able to return to school?
And again, I would like to see the data on, as we learn more. For example, I'm reading recently that they don't think it's transferred on surfaces anymore. So I think as we learn more, data will present itself, and we will err on the side of keeping people safe. So if there's a way that we can accomplish a way to be safer, we will do it. One of the issues now, and the reason what I mean by that is there a way, we're still short on masks, still short on a lot of things. and schools are ordering them, and we're not getting them because there are still greater needs in other areas. So we have to react to what our reality is.
All right,
I
thank
have
you.
a question, Franco, if you allow me.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
In regards to this whole technology and going back to school or visual and I know we only have like the last 3 months or 2 months in regards to doing this learning distance, but how would you deal with students, being sure the student doesn't fall behind? That no, we're 6 months from now, we're not, or a year from now, we're not failing kids because we're finding out that they're in line and they're not catching up and they're not passing the test. And how would you deal with catching those on time, and what would you put in place for those kids?
Thanks, Victor. And actually, as we all know, that happens now with traditional school. When kids come to school, we still have a tough time engaging them and making sure that they're keeping up and not falling behind. But if it's going to be an online piece, and we would handle it the same way we would handle it as if a kid's not logging on and doing work, we would treat it the same way as a kid not coming to school. We send somebody else, knock on your door, and figure out what your needs are. Because again, it comes down to, it's an equity piece. It comes down to equal access to opportunities. And if these kids aren't taking advantage, and oftentimes you hear how the parents don't care, and that's not true. There's a mountain of research out there that supports that parents in poverty value education every bit as much as wealthy parents. It comes down to having access to opportunities. We need to find out what opportunity, what needs they have, and our job is to help meet those. It's part of that wraparound service piece, but as education is provided in a different way, we have to make sure that we're providing the supports necessary to make sure that it's taking advantage, they're happening the right way.
I would like to jump in. I know that Lorain City Schools is in somewhat of financial district in problem.
I'm sorry,
How are you going to fund if there's no funds locally, all of the funds federally that are being brought in for districts to go to a digital? And also, Lorain City Schools had a digital program about 5 years ago that left. And when the kids couldn't keep up, they actually had one building, I think it was General Johnny Wilson, an area where the kids could come into the building to get support. So that might be something that you can have people on location and have digital, have both, just a suggestion. But how do you plan to deal with the funding part of all of this?
And that's when David asked his question, I couldn't speak to exactly where the district was. I know there's a 21 mil renewal levy coming up in the fall. And
Yeah.
I know there's some other financial issues that we need to deal with as well. But the reality is we have to find education. And there are ways to do that that are, even with technology, that are cost effective.
Okay.
Becky, I have a feeling like you can see my questions because the very next question is going to.
I'm psychic, baby.
I know, it's uncanny what's happening here.
I was a very effective teacher, so I'm always thinking.
The next question is, we have levy renewals approaching and the need for new monies ahead. Where would you make reductions if it came to that? And tell us about your thoughts on the budget.
Now, again, the question of where I make reductions, I don't know. What I would do is surround myself with a group of people. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, we'd engage the right people, we'd identify our priorities, and then we create a budget from there. And for me, budgeting is pretty simple. You take a list of things you prioritize, you draw a line, and if it's below the line, you don't have it. And if it needs to be, if something below the line needs to be, then you put it above the line, but something above the line has to go below the line. So it's more of the process that we have followed to determine that, and it would be collective. We'd have our teachers at the table, support staff at the table, or community members at the table, and we would prioritize our needs, and then figure out a way to meet those needs. But yes, as I understand it, there is a huge renewal levy that's up in the fall, and a new money levy that's around the corner.
Okay. All right, and we've been going on for well over 30 minutes now, and we are at our last question. And so the question is, how will you collaborate with parents, teachers, and the school board? What would that look like under your leadership?
And I think I described that earlier. We would engage them very early on to find out how they want to receive information, what information they want to receive. And then once we know how to connect with them, then the next question, and more importantly, is how do you want to be engaged? And then we engage them. And then we monitor throughout. So I think we create opportunities for people to be engaged in a manner in which they want to be engaged. So engagement is not where I share information and you get it, or it's people sitting together at the table, working on issues together. And yeah, so we would define that together. And again, it's the process we followed the first time. And then when we went back and surveyed, you know, how are we doing? We got great feedback. So we would start with that and then continue to grow.
Okay. The group, do you
I
have
have a
another?
follow-up to that.
Okay, good, good.
Dr. Graham, you did well with parents last time in the town halls, and I remember all of that. With House Bill 70 taking full effect now, would you plan to collaborate with the school board similarly to interim Greg Reed?
And I can't speak to what Greg did, but the school board, and I understand the spirit of House Bill 70, and there are some districts where maybe the school board should not be engaged because the school boards in some communities, I'm sure, cause harm. That's not our school board. Our school board is full of true leaders in our community, people that I know and trust completely, and I don't know how Greg engages them, but they would have a strong voice similar to a district who wasn't under House Bill 70.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please
thank
go
you.
ahead.
From a curriculum standpoint, what would be your perspective on aligning the work that's taking place in the elementary schools, middle schools, and the high school to make sure that kids are prepared when they enter that high school, ready to learn and equipped with everything that they need? I know I was following some of the work, and it seemed as if there was some work that needed to take place to make sure that the children were prepared when they get to high school and that they're on track to graduate. What would be your thoughts around that?
That's a great question. And I think that people understand that when students in Canton, Lorain, and districts of poverty, that when kids come in to school, they're behind grade level, sometimes several years behind grade level. And that's fine. Those are the students we have. Our job is to grow them faster because there's absolutely no reason why these students are behind except for issues of equity. They don't have the same access to opportunities. And when I talk about that, and I just want to emphasize these 2 points, when you look at the issues that impact student achievement, whether in Canton, and I forget the number in Lorain, but we had it. When you look at students who started school in Canton and didn't move, and they graduated from Canton, when you look at last year's cohort, the graduating class of 2019, Canton had a 96% graduation rate. And when we did that exercise in Lorain, it was close to that. Transiency is one of the big struggles that we have in our district, and absenteeism. Absenteeism in Lorain is similar to Canton, and students miss an average of, 18% of our students miss an average of a month of school. And that includes kids in grades K1 and 2. And it's not their fault, but again, it's about having access to opportunity. So that aside, we need to focus on those issues. But what we need to do is implement a couple of things that help students grow at a faster rate because our kids are completely able to learn at a high level. Those 2 things, if memory serves in Lorain, unless it's changed, is also consistent with what we're dealing with in Canton. Those 2 things are the Ohio Improvement Process, which are teacher-based teams and teachers. For example, if I'm a 3rd grade teacher, I sit down with a whole bunch of other 3rd grade teachers, and we get really good at putting lessons together. Building level teams, where we look at what each grade level needs in that building, and district level teams to make sure that each building is getting what they need. And when you do that, it's the teacher-based team. The focus needs to be on future stuff. What we tend to do is say, I tested the students and they're still doing bad at this, so I keep going back to teach what they're not good at, as opposed to teaching grade level standards. And while you're teaching grade level standards, you're also incorporating and embedding those areas where they need to grow. So it's, instead of deficiency teaching, you're teaching, because if not, then you never get grade level standards. And statistically speaking, once you get good at the TBT process, students, I think the effect size is like a 1.52 or whatever, which means that the students will demonstrate 3 years worth of academic growth in a school year. Now, it takes a while before teachers are good at it, administrators are good at it, but that's an area of focus. The other would be MTSS, which is a multi-tiered system of supports, where you deal with issues when they're minor and don't allow them to become major ones. And once our staff gets good at those two things, you see tremendous growth, and then our kids are ready for high school. But again, I don't have an answer for, and we're trying to figure out the old transiency piece and the chronic absenteeism piece.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for the feedback. Dr. Graham, thank you so much for your insight. We want to make sure that we stay on schedule tonight, and I feel like we've covered a lot of different bases here, and everyone for the first go round here did a really good job of asking those follow-ups, and really appreciate that. And so I want to thank you for your time, Dr. Graham, and
thanks everybody for coming, hanging out with me.
We will be in touch. So thank you so much.
All right, have a great night. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm going to hit the